Welcome to episode 6 of No Dice, a podcast series talking about female gambling addiction and stories of recovery across Scotland. I'm your host of the series, Kat Cochrane, and having been in compulsive gambling recovery for 4 years, I've been sharing my own journey towards the goal of a gamble-free life. As a content warning, this episode does cover themes of addiction and gambling behaviour. In this episode, we'll be covering advice and experiences around keeping safe day-to-day in early recovery for women at this particular stage of their journey. Joining me as guests to chat about this topic are Nicola O, Neill and Lorraine Hannah from GamCare. As a leading national provider of advice, support and free counselling for nearly 30 years, GamCare offers help to anyone affected by gambling harms. Nicola is an experienced senior service manager, while Lorraine's role is centred within outreach and engagement. Welcome, ladies. I'm delighted to have you both join me in this particular episode of No Dice. Now, as an introduction to the work that you do at GamCare, can you share a little bit about your roles, in particular to how you support women?
Hi, Kat, and thanks for having us with you today. We're super excited to support the podcast and to help in any way to share any insights that we have. My role in GamCare is the senior manager for our 5 regional services. GamCare has a few different functions in-house. One is the helpline that supports people across England, Scotland and Wales. But we also offer direct support across 5 different regions, one of those being Glasgow and Edinburgh and South and North Lanarkshire in Scotland. So my role is essentially to keep all those services front and centre for our clients, making sure that we're really available, accessible, that we're always making sure that our services are safe and available, that anybody coming through support gets the right level of support that we can offer, making sure all our staff are supported to do that. And we essentially have 5 managers and we kind of keep them all focused and on track, keeping their teams safe and well, keeping all the people across our regions free from gambling harms.
Hello, my name's Lorraine. I am the Outreach and Engagement Practitioner for GamCare. I cover Glasgow, Edinburgh, North Lanarkshire and South Lanarkshire, and I'm here today with my big boss, Nicola. Sorry, she's my senior manager. She always gives me a ride with that.
In regards to the theme of keeping safe in the day-to-day in early recovery, this is something I really struggled with when I entered recovery for the first time. And I recall the feeling of not being able to see the woods from the trees, as it were. Because overall, I was saying to myself, I never want to gamble again. I'm never going to gamble again. But that's when the hard work really has to kick in. And even though I went to GA in those early days and tried to gather as much information on keeping away from a bet, it kept going over in my head that I can't wait till next month or next year to say I've not gambled. But really what we need to do is break it down and getting through each day. In fact, for many of us, it's a case of 1 hour at a time in the very early days. And that's the essence of what we want to get at in this episode. What are the practical barriers we as women can put in place from gambling when behaviour starts to become harmful and a period recovery has started? Can I ask you, what would you say are certain pieces of advice that hold particularly for women as they enter the early days of recovery in regards to keeping safe daily?
From the feedback that we get from the clients that we support, nearly everyone talks about tools where you can self-exclude. What you just said there around the sort of hour to hour, maybe day to day. The self-exclusion tools for a lot of people are like a bit of a godsend, because that thought, that sort of recurring sort of urge, or maybe thinking, actually, I've just got hold of another bit of cash or money and maybe I'll sort of go again. Those exclusion tools can be that difference in those early stages. It's a sort of like a hurdle to get over. Some people might fight through them and sort of might find a way to get around them. But for an awful lot of people, it's like this restricted sort of bubble that they kind of can't sort of penetrate. And it gives them just that bit of time, bit of space to think and to sort of catch hold of themselves, remind. You were saying there about, I'm so determined to get through that month. I'm going to have a month free of gambling. It's maybe just the thing that you need to just assist you in those early days. I've heard a lot of people say over the years, I'm going to do it all by myself and I should be able to do this without any support. I would sort of probably say that nearly everyone should avail themselves to these exclusion tools, because it might just be the thing that just gets you through that other day and gives you that resolve and that strength to think, I can do this. That's what they're sort of there for. That's what they're there to serve, is that need. A lot of people that I've worked with, if you're telling me that you're trying to give up smoking, but you're going to stick like a packet of fags and a lighter on the table and just stare at it and tell yourself that you're just not going to pick up another cigarette and smoke it, I would strongly advise against that. I would suggest that you pick up those fags and destroy them, not even sort of ask someone else to keep hold of them. And that's sort of really what the self-exclusion does, particularly with gambling and its availability and its access, that we know that we have concern around that. If it's in your phone, it's in your pocket, you've got to put a barrier in place. I think for most people coming through those early days, don't wonder about it or think too hard about it. Put the exclusions in place and build upon that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, to be honest, the first barriers I put in place, and this was through advice and through, I suppose, common sense, was, so the first one was disabling my debit cards with the bank on like mobile banking, because that was kind of like, especially when online is your big trigger. The second thing I did was put GamBan on my phone and my laptop, and that is all to do with just anytime I'd like say put in Willie Hill, whatever. I don't like to advertise any gambling firm on here, you know.
We're not endorsing
any of them. There are the better sort, and they're all the same. So GamBan in itself, when I placed that on my phone or my laptop, if I was to type any particular gambling site or any gambling site, and I know there's like some that get around this, but basically they would just be a void. I just wasn't able to get on that platform, and as frustrating as it was, I was like, that's why that's there and that's why that's working. And that was huge. That was really, really big, that one. And then the third one for me personally was self-banning myself from UK casinos, because that was like my go-to. For years it had been bookies, but then I'd gone into the casinos, and I think it was quite cool because I knew if I went into the one casino in Glasgow, because they're all sort of operating in the same and under the same rules, it meant that I was not able to go into any in the UK. And that was like the first 3 things that I did, and I think I did them within a few days. And it can be really stressful because you're like, right, what do I need to do? What's all the things, you know, that people say, ban yourself from bookies, ban yourself from this, ban yourself from that. And it's like, where do you go? But I think having looked on the GamCare site, there is enough information where it just takes you through those steps and avoids or takes away some of that stress, which is really, really good. And I know other sites do that, but I think the GamCare site does that pretty well. It's pretty impressive, because I knew if I did those things, I would still be leaving some avenues open, but that kind of kicked that off.
I think that's the difference, isn't it? Like you say, that there could be windows to climb through if you want to really sort of go in search of them. But if you are generally closing most doors, it just makes it that little bit harder. And I think for me, it's the less availability. Like if you're going to, you know, put the kettle on or have any other type of drink to relax, and you're sat down and that phone comes out and it's available to you, you're struggling right away. So whatever you can do, whether it's the bank transaction block, GamBan, GamStop, physical spaces with Sense and Moses for the bookmakers, and it's a psychological change that happens. And you think, well, I can't, and I might want to, or I might have thought about it, and that urge is there. But actually, if I can't, well, then I have to do something different. I have to change track.
Yep.
And for so many people, they describe it as that of like, if it hadn't been for that, I probably would have succumbed. Like I probably would have slipped. But actually, because I couldn't, I just had to kind of do something else instead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when I came clean to my partner for the first time about the gambling situation that I'd get into and the harm that I was doing myself and the harm I was doing to her as well, but that was still an issue to be broached. I knew what I had to do, but I had a period where I didn't do it because I didn't take my recovery in earnest. And there was that kind of like limbo period where people say, yeah, okay, I'll go to GA, I'll do this, I'll do that. But until you're actually doing those practical things, you're not really starting. And that's what I reflect on now. It's like I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. Yeah, I wasn't ready, but I was, as soon as those 3 things clicked, then it was like everything else felt a bit easier, because like you say, it's like the shutters are down.
Moved you around that cycle. I don't know if you've worked with the cycle of change as sort of any part of your recovery, you know, as a tool, as an, you know, sort of an engagement tool.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. Having been to like a few women-specific groups round about it, women in general are far less likely to come forward for it, whether they are an affected other or whether they are somebody who is gambling. But when they do come forward for it, they like to be able to know that there's a safe space to it. And I think that's what's quite good about the GamCare website is they've got peer support on there as well. So they can go in, they can look at lived experience, they can read other people's stories, and they can feel so less alone. And I think that's definitely something that comes across from the women that I've spoken to, is that they think that they're the only one there that's got this issue. They're the one that's only got this stigma. They're the one that's got this shame, and it's absolutely not true. And they've got nothing to be ashamed of at all. And I think that's what they really like about our website, is that they can go in there, even if they decide not to phone the helpline just yet, because they're not yet in that space yet. But they can go in there and they can find all this information, like you're saying about GAM ban, GAM stop. And then if they do want to actually take that step and phone the helpline and get support, then that's what they know where to get it and know how to get it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's that feeling where so many women gamble in isolation. And then when that myth is burst, that you're not the only one, and there is a space where you can lean into, whether it's just through a website, but a digital website can be a safe space. It can feel like, it can give you a feeling of a safe space. And I know that I've done that with some websites on like the New Beginnings or some of the other ones, and on GamCare in the early days as well. And it's kind of like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. That's a huge day in somebody's recovery. And
in that moment that support exists, isn't it? Whether it's GamCare, RCA, whether it's any of our national sort of support offers, there's I think once you tap into, there is support out there.
Yeah.
And it starts speaking to you, and like say that it can't have been built without other people having been there and accessed it, and there is something I think so comforting and reassuring to go, there's a life support right there, right now. It must feel like one of those moments of, I can now step into another space for myself. There's somewhere now to go.
Yeah, it just alleviates so much of that isolation. Not necessarily overnight. You might teeter on checking out the website and you don't go further, but you do, hopefully get there. Now, one of the things we need to accept in Scotland is that the majority of services addressing gambling harms are not to be found through our healthcare system in the way that you'd find them for drugs and alcohol. It's the third sector, part of the National Gambling Support Network, that provides so much support and information. If I was entering recovery today and I researched where I can find support and landed on the GamCare website, what are the practical tools and advice that would keep me safe, say, in my first 48 hours of reaching out for help in that particular situation?
I think that's quite interesting because, as you said, we've got all these tools and tips and hints and things like that. You've got like GAM ban, GAM stop, we've talked about that. We advertise the National Gambling Helpline, thank you, quite heavily on it, and we do encourage people to, the good thing about the helpline is that you can phone up, you can use WhatsApp, you can chat to them, you can email them as well. So even if you don't feel fully comfortable yet at picking up the phone to somebody, because that barrier could be there and it shouldn't be there, for women or for men. And hopefully by the job that I do, being out to organisations and and talking to people and things like that, they realise that we're not scary, we are there to support and help people, because that's a big part of it, is actually saying to people, come and speak to us if you think you're struggling. So if you don't know who to turn to, because a lot of the time, if you look it up, you go on the GamCare website and then you might have that moment of panic and think, oh my God, what am I going to do? I went to an organisation, but it's like a White Rock women's group, right? And I've heard Lorraine talking about GamCare, this is what they do. They're not scary at all. I've got the leaflet in front of me. It's got the information on it. I maybe go on the website and then they look and they see, there's GAM ban, right? That's perfect. That's the only one I need to do. Or they think, I didn't realise that, like you were saying, like you can block your banking card from it. A lot of people don't realise that they can do that. So even though doing those simple things might be enough for that person to stop, or it might be that they need extra support there because, as you said, that's not enough for them. And I think the thing as well is for women that come to, a lot of the time, they're an affected other because their partner, family member, friend, whatever, is the person that gambles. We've got loads of information on the GamCare website about that as well, and we definitely support affected others as well. And I think that's really quite important.
It's so crucial because it's like, obviously, if you're in a situation, it's like, I'm ready to do recovery. I'm here for it. I'm going to do it. But can I take my partner along, or can I take my mum or my dad or my son or my neighbours, my colleagues along with me? What information is for them? And I think that that's really important, because going from being in an isolated situation, gambling, but then even going into feeling a bit isolated in recovery is, it's like a journey where you have to have a safe space where if your partner wants to come on the website, get the information, and then it's like a bit of GA meeting or taking people along with you. If friends and family aren't ready to be there, but if at least they know when they are ready, there's like that information out there. And I think that's so vital, because having that support from loved ones, as well as knowing that you can go on the GamCare website, it kind of keeps you propped up in the right direction. But one of the things that I really, and I know a lot of women struggle with, is communicating the fact that they've been experiencing gambling harms, and that's due to shame and stigma. Now, there are all sorts of reasons why we can't tell our partners, family members, colleagues, and all these things can be really challenging very early on. So what are the best ways for women to communicate their gambling harms in confidence? What kind of avenues are on the GamCare website where that can happen in particular?
Well, just following up from what Lorraine said there, you can go onto the website and just sort of start a live chat. There's no way that can be sort of traced to you. It's, it just sort of links in with the same staff that are on the helpline taking calls. They also monitor all the live chat. And the helpline is staffed all day and all night. It's sort of 24/7. So I think for some people, it is about finding the right time for them. And I think that's sort of probably one of the real bonuses of the helpline function, and being able to access it through the website. So we're back to those, that scenario where you can see somebody with their phone, and if I can just sort of go in and have a look and nobody knows what I'm looking at right there and then, we're sort of helping sort of somebody access information, read testimonials, realise that there's support options. And they might be thinking, I can't call right now, but I am going to definitely find that private time to make the call. But they could do the live chat there and then, and no one knows who they're texting and who they're messaging. So that's, for me, is sort of a crucial thing that's available for people. I think as well, the fact that it is 24/7, we will get people that call in on their way somewhere. It might be in the car and they're thinking, okay, well, no one else is in the car and no one can hear me when I'm in the car. So I'm actually going to park up somewhere, and that's when I'm going to have a conversation. I don't have to physically walk in to a building and knock on the door and book an appointment and give my name over and start to explain any other sort of personal details about myself. I can go straight into the conversation and get some support and advice and help right away. And when I was looking at the questions and looking at those early sort of hours, if you like, and if you're looking at 24 hours, 48 hours, we're talking very early, and sort of capturing somebody in that moment of, I need to do something about this. And anyone that contacts through the helpline, no matter where you are, the helpline are connected to all the support services right across Wales, Scotland, England. Helpline is connected with everyone. You would be in touch with a local service in that time frame. Like, that is sort of a direct connection through. And every single one of providers in the National Gambling Support Network is committed to that really early response. We are all absolutely committed to it. So the chance that you will then also get somebody reaching out to you on your preferred means of communication, right? We really know that that's important. Like, don't just call somebody and they're in a shop or at home or at work and they're going, oh my God, like, I can't answer this phone here, and start having that conversation. So, if it's like, could you email me or could you text me? Yes, we can do that. We will do it on your terms. We're very, very, very conscious. I'd say every single staff member that I know is super conscious of somebody wanting to keep it discreet and confidential and not to be exposed. That's quite a risky feeling, I think, for a lot of people in those early moments. We make sure that we work hard to not expose you in those moments. We meet you where you need to be met.
Am I right in saying that GamCare is the only gambling support provider that has a live chat that's 24 hours? Is there others, or is it, as far as I know, that's the only one?
As far as I know,
quite impressive that it's, because often those moments of crisis are happening like 2 o'clock, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, where people have got insomnia and they're stressed and they go up out of bed so the partner doesn't hear, the kids don't hear, and all that. So that is, I imagine there's a lot of...
Let's think about our person here, and I can think of someone from a couple of years ago, and it was a female client, and it was a case of waking up in the night and not being able to get back off to sleep, and the phone is by the bed and the phone gets picked up, and not waking anyone else up in the house, but just on that screen. And that was where the gambling was happening, right? So this was particularly when we looked at patterns of behaviour, times of day, how do we start to help with change of behaviour? That was quite a tough nut to crack in terms of, what do you do at 3 o'clock in the morning when you don't want to wake anyone up and the phone's available? So again, back to how important those exclusion tools can be, because if you can't do it, well, then that's great. But equally, how good it is to have access to online support, because actually what you can do is you can get onto that live chat, or you can go onto forums, or you can call somebody if you want to, and that is your alternative. So I think it's something about trying to match people in that space of, is gambling an option for me when I'm sort of a bit stuck and where else do I go and what do I do and the phone. I think it is important for all services to sort of think that's where it's happening. So we also need to be in that space and providing something as an alternative.
The choices are good. The choices are really, really good, because I think years ago it was just, okay, I've got a gambling problem. What do I do? Or just get yourself to GA, and that was like the one-stop shop. Whereas I think 365, and that's so important, because it means that nobody should fall through the net if they're ready to engage. The offer is there if they're ready to engage.
I was laughing when you were saying about 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up, because I do that. I doom scroll. I don't gamble at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I remember I was at an event and somebody came up to tell me about their husband, and that's what he used to do. He'd be like that, right, that's it, I'm not gambling, that's me, and I'm waking up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I've won £1,000, let's book a holiday, yeah, this is great. And then she'd be like, oh great, I'll look at that looking in the morning come round, no, you need to give me like 20 quid to fix what I do. She came forward for support and is getting supported through GamCare as an affected other, but it's so important that, just exactly what you're saying, I think that, obviously I'm not clinical, so I don't know what happened to the partner, but I do know that when I met the girl again at another event, she said that she came forward and was getting support kind of thing, and found it really useful.
Something I didn't do personally, and this is probably because it came down to pride, if anything, was to give my partner or a trusted family member control or access to my bank account or cash. Now, for a lot of women, it's something of a last resort, and it can be really painful. But it can also be an act of rebuilding trust within ourselves as gamblers and with others. If there's issues around, and there always is going to be overspending and gambling, lying about where the money is, why the debts have run out, etc. In your experience of relinquishing control and access to money to a partner, is that something you think that works for women as they enter recovery? Is that something you would advocate?
Can I just ask something there? So you said that you didn't do it because you didn't feel you were in that space yet. So given that where you are now in recovery, would you say you had a relapse and you thought, I feel lucky this week I'm going to go and spend all my money at the bookies kind of thing, would you now, being where you are in recovery, then relinquish that?
That's a good question.
No,
not at all. Not at all. I'm glad that's been battered back to me now that I'm down the line in recovery. I think that I wouldn't be adverse to it. I would need to have that conversation in my own head around, okay, is this a big enough relapse or is it a trip, slip and a fall? And they can all be the same thing, to the point where, okay, the only person in the world that I know where my money is safe is like my mum, for example. That's the one, like that's like the bank, not the bank of mum, because that's another thing. That's when you're lending and borrowing. It's like safe as houses, And yet I wouldn't be adverse to it, because in my recovery, what I've realised is that nothing's off the table when it comes to putting barriers up. I think it was because for me, there was like an age gap between me and my ex-partner, and she was younger, and I was like, why would I want to give her my money? And she's like, she doesn't, and it was like a pure gallus thing, do you know what I mean? It was like, what's this all about? The pride and the ego and all that, and even though that was like the most common sense thing that I should have done, I was like, nah. Now, if I ever got to that place, I think I would be okay with relinquishing it. We're not together, like my partner at the time, we're not together, so that wouldn't be going to her. But to my mum, I think I would, because like that pride thing's gone, that ego thing's gone, and it would probably be safe for me. And then it's also like letting her know that I've had a trip, slip and fall. It's interesting that you asked that, yeah. Thank you, Lorraine, for putting me on the spot.
I'll pass over to Nicola now to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you can sort of do that reflective piece in a safe space. It's, I think, something that you sort of said there made me think, okay, there's definitely some cultural sort of issues around this. And in the question, you did say partner, and actually you've answered your own saying, well, I'd probably go to a parent. And there's something, I think, in the dynamic of money that there is potentially an easier choice in, would your parent sort of hold on to the money? And I think is that trust issues anyway in partners and relationships, etc. So it feels like sometimes like an easy option to say, and I'm just going to hand over all my money to someone else. And isn't that just nice that we can just solve the problem to a certain extent, because I can't access, again, it's access. Well, I can't access the money anyway. And we've talked about exclusion tools is taking away access to means of gambling. So the other thing that we work with is like, how do we restrict your access to end finances, right? That's our next big area of like, what are we going to focus on with finance? So again, you can do the bank transactions, which a lot of people now, they feel that they don't need to necessarily hand over, the cards completely, because actually if I can't use them in that way, am I safer anyhow? And then that still gives me, my access to the money to be day to day and practical, and I need to pop into the shops and stuff like that. Across the board, I would say we get an absolute range of different approaches. A client that's sort of popped into my head is when we spoke about this, she talked about a previous relationship where it had been a quite abusive type of relationship, and actually she had been restricted to her access as part of the abusive nature of the relationship. So she was now in a different relationship and feeling very confident in her partner and no sort of fear of abuse. But to do that action put her in a really triggering sort of space. So she was stuck with, I think I really need it to support me and to help me. And psychologically, that's going to destroy me a little bit, because then I've got a whole different trust issue going on. So I suppose there's something about maybe the level of harm of gambling versus what are going to be the consequences of passing over your financial control. And I think everything we understand and know about women in the space in terms of potentially abusive sort of situations considered and thought about in a wider context other than just there's a solution, because it might open up other sort of issues.
Yeah, it's very individual, I'd say, in terms of...
I was just going to say as well, when you're talking about handing over the money side of things, when you get to underrepresented communities like ethnic minorities and that, the women in a lot of these communities don't have access to bank accounts, don't have access to the money. That adds another layer of complexity on it. They maybe just get £50 a week to go and buy the messages. And it's like, instead of spending that £50, some of them are saying, right, well, I'll go and play bingo on my phone with £10 because that means I'll be able to get £20 and I'll be able to buy the kids' shoes without having to go and ask him. I'm not saying that's true in all cases, but it's some, again, I've been to like a women's shelter, dealt with specifically Muslim women, and they were talking about some didn't really know where to start with financial stuff because they'd never been brought up round about it. So they didn't know how to open a bank account, they didn't know how to budget, they didn't know what to do with things like that, because, and not in all cases, but in some cases, it could be potentially that their husband gambled their money away. So they were starting to look to having to start again. So that adds another level of complexity onto it as well, because you've got the cultural as well, which can make it,
it's very complicated. But I guess that's where GamCare can step in, because if that is something that women at any part of the recovery or from any cultural background, or they can seek advice and they can kind of bounce off other people with lived experience if it's worked for them or not, and it's like that advice is there, because I always think that's quite a big question. It's like, how am I safe with my money? But there's so much to it. There's so many caveats around this one.
Yeah, and also, I mean, one of the points that you make on it is, does it work long term? And I know we're sort of maybe talking about keeping sort of safe initially, and what sort of actions can you take? Don't think I've ever moved away from probably working with any client, whatever, looking at how you spend your time. It's we sort of use that sort of ATM model of like, if you block that and you block that and you block that, then you're stuck and you've got a sort of a cage where you can't gamble, and that's your short term getting control back, right? Like, let's get it under control, let's get it stopped, and then let's start opening up these sort of avenues of you being in control of yourself. So I think you probably hit on a big word, I think, in the world of gambling, is control is sort of key. Being in control, out of control, trying to take control, and that idea of getting control of your money or not having control of your money, I think it's a very powerful word in whatever way we sort of apply and use it. And I think I've probably said to every person I've worked with for the years, I want you to be in a situation where you've got full access to everything. You've got time on your hands, you've got the whole lot, and you're choosing a different option for yourself, right? You're choosing to not gamble because you could if you wanted to. You've got money in your pocket, you've got the access available to you, and you've got free time, but you choose for yourself that this is not what I want to do. And that's sort of the recovery part of it for me, is that brings somebody back into that space of, we've not restricted everything and limited everything. We've actually might have done it initially just because it feels out of control, but then we sort of bring that all back, and you're in a place where you're making really good choices for yourself.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Now, GamCare also offers help and advice to friends and family, and I know we've dipped into this a little bit earlier on. So friends and family who are supporting someone experiencing gambling harm, and this is something I didn't think about so much as to what my partner and family needed when I entered recovery. And I wish I had. And it's one of my biggest regrets, because I felt I was like, okay, I'm going into recovery, I'm fine, I'm all right, Jack, but I didn't bring them with me. And it meant that their understanding of my recovery and what I was going through, and if I was getting better or relapsing or whatever, it wasn't on the same level as I was experiencing it. And I think, 2020 hindsight and all that, but it's something that I would really recommend for anybody in recovery. If there is even like one person who's supporting you, take them in your journey as much as you can. So what can anyone in that position on GamCare in the platform find if they are perhaps even just someone who is thinking, I know my partner or my friend or my family member is struggling, but I need to get information that's going to support them? Is there specific spaces on GamCare where I could go to in relevancy to that?
So I've been to like loads of events, loads of meetings, loads of organisations, and what you find is, in general, people come up and say, oh, it's my partner that gambles, or I know somebody that gambles. It's very, very rare for them to come up and say, I'm struggling with gambling harems. So what I do is I talk to them as if they are the affected other, because for all, I'm not in the place to say, no, you're a wee liar, you are the gambler, do you know what I mean?
Asking for a friend, that situation, yeah.
It's not me. It's never me. No, so what I always say to them is I always treat them as if they would be the affected lad, because as far as I know, I'm not saying all these cases, it could be something like that, yeah. And our team definitely do offer support to affected others as well. And what they do is that they would treat them the same as they would with somebody that's got issues with gambling harems. And Nicola will be able to talk to you more about the clinical perspective of that, because I don't do that at all. But it is interesting. I always find it quite interesting. I always come back from these events, as Nicola knows, she calls it like releasing my energy, because I'm always buzzing, saying like, oh my God, this happened, I spoke to so many people and blah, 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 blah. But a lot of people tend to think they feel better if they come, which is daft, because like, it's again, brings back this stigma and shame that shouldn't be ashamed, it shouldn't have any stigma in that. But it's almost like, well, if I say it's my friend or it's my husband, then that's okay, because then I can get the information, I'll look at it later myself. But we absolutely, we treat everybody the same, whether they're an affected other or whether they're somebody that is suffering from gambling harms. And I've found that really interesting since I joined the company, because it's not something I would ever have thought of before, was as somebody that's impacted by gambling harms. But, people are a bit, at GamCare, we're very nice, so come and talk to us.
No, I mean, gamblers, like compulsive gamblers, do not think about their loved ones when they're gambling. I know, and I can testify to that, because even when I entered recovery, I was like 3 years down the line, and it is when I did an online cohort with New Beginnings through Bet No More, and they did a perfect scenario whereby the cohort had a mixture of lived experience women and women who were affected. And that put a mirror up to me, because I'd never been in that same space. I'd went to GA, I'd went to rehab, and it was just all about the other compulsive gamblers just like me. And then I was sitting and I was like that, and hearing the stories of the women, and one was it was her daughter that was affected, one was a partner, one was actually a few family members. It was very complicated, and I went, whoa, this has blown my mind, and I'm 3 years in recovery and I'm only hearing this for the first time. It gave another level to my recovery, because I had to think about all the harm that I'd done back then, and the fact that I hadn't really thought about what people around me need. I was just like, I'm the broken one. You all just need to put all your energy into fixing me. I'll put all the energy into fixing me, but you need to prop me up. Not everyone, you might recognise the harm that you're doing from day one, or it might take years to realise. But I think that affected others are so forgotten about by the compulsive gambler. So it's really important that the support services are there to support the affected others.
I mean, just to come in on that, that's probably why sort of every sort of early conversation that we have, whether we're out in the community or dealing with somebody sort of in that one-to-one space, I mean, you don't finish any initial conversation saying, right, so who's around you and how are they feeling? And your response there, I've heard that probably a few times of like, well, yeah, they're fine. And as long as I maybe stop gambling, they're going to be dead happy. And you're like, okay, and we will dig deeper on that one. You won't get away with that with us.
Yeah,
and
quite rightly too.
Yeah, and I wonder how they felt when you said about this, you said about that, and I wonder where they were in all of that. And not to be confrontational with that person, because obviously we do want a person to sort of work well in their own recovery, but we almost don't quite let people off the hook on that, because it is crucial, I think, isn't it, to, well, you just sort of said that about being in that room and hearing it, thinking, hey, hold on a minute, how come I've not thought about that? And we probably might not do it too early on, like if it feels like it's can't go there too soon, but we certainly check it out initially, always. It's the checking out of, is there someone around who you think they would also benefit from having a chat with somebody? So the offer of support is there right from the beginning. And then sometimes we might realise that actually this person maybe needs to be sort of taken on a bit of a journey of, and I wonder who else has been impacted and in what ways have been impacted. So yeah, I mean, I suppose for anyone that is thinking, that's me, like I that person over there is gambling and we're having to live with it, and it's affecting me on the day to day, and I'm worried sick and I'm thinking about the next time, and they've said before that they're going to stop, and then what if they don't? I mean, the trust is a big issue that we come up against, and what we do a lot of work with around affected others is how would they know, how do they know really now if they're saying they're not gambling but they've heard it before and they've seen it before. And I think that interesting sort of part of somebody not necessarily knowing if they're an affected other, because if it's a hidden behaviour, there's something going on, and your partner or your child or your friend or whoever is seemingly isolating and they're not connecting in the same ways that they used to. And I've had, I don't know how many people over the years say, I genuinely thought, if it's a partner, I genuinely thought that they were cheating on me. Really common one. And there's almost a bit of a shock but relief, double whammy kind of feeling going on of, I'm kind of thinking, it was that. So you're not cheating on, there isn't another person, like it's been that, and then you're like, it's been that. What? Like, what do you mean you've been like? And so that explains why we couldn't do this, and when that time that you said that, so then the trust stuff really comes out, because what we find with the person that's an affected other, if this is quite new to them, the person that's gambling is saying, it feels so good to be able to talk about it finally, and everyone now knows, and guess what, I'm looking at recovery now, and this brave new world is opening up to me. And for our affected others, a really common feature is, I don't understand this world that I've just walked into, and I don't get why you everything you're saying is foreign language, and I now need to suddenly understand what gambling harms is. So yes, it's important that people come to the website and say, I don't know what gambling harms is, and how am I supposed to offer support or understand this? I think that's something that we have to be really mindful of. And if we're working with the affected other of the person that has been gambling, there's this twofold change that's going on in this relationship, that this person's feeling relieved and feeling that they're putting down a big burden and climbing out the hole, whatever sort of imagery sort of works. This person over here is going, I don't know if I know this person anymore. I'm now reliving lots of different experiences and thinking about it in a different way. And also I think for the affected other is that it pops up in the future in different ways as well. If it has massively affected the finances, both being pulled into that financial harm space, it's going to impact on everyone in the family. So someone a few years ago, and it suddenly flared up and they were angry again, and there was big arguments going on, and it was the washing machine had broke, and they couldn't just go out and replace the washing machine because actually they were still counting the cost of the financial impact and the debt, and they were sort of sorting that stuff out. And straight away angry that this person gambled. And the person who was in recovery was like, hey, I'm doing great over here. Look at the distance I've travelled. And like, how can you just suddenly start rearing up at me again? And, it's really important that we help both sides to understand the different positions people are in, the different emotions and the different experiences that's been having.
Yeah, but going back to what you were saying there about the cheating question, I think it's quite ironic that, because in a way, gambling addicts, it's like they're having a relationship with gambling, they're having a relationship with their relationship with gambling, and often it's like the partners that are neglected, so it's no wonder. Because actually one of the things that kept me propped up even now is thinking of gambling as a relationship, and would I ever let somebody treat me the way that gambling's treated me? And when I ask that question, I'm always like, no, gambling is a relationship that I need to keep away from, just like if it was a person. If I think of it as a person, and I'm like, no, I'm staying clear of them forever, So it's really interesting, and I'm not surprised that comes up again and again. Now, we're all working towards raising awareness, fighting industry, and building a platform where preventative measures against gambling harms really hold up in the future. Can you share what you feel most passionate about in terms of change and progress in the long and short term, particularly for women across Scotland?
I think for me, what's really good is being able to go out and talk to women, different women's groups, raising awareness, talking to people about it, telling people who GamCare are, what we do, who we support, and especially around about affected others as well. Because as we've said all the way throughout this, like affected others is an area that isn't really talked about as much and I think for me that's something that's really important, is that more and more people are getting aware of who we are. When you think of people who are suffering from gambling harems, you think the first place is GA, which is fantastic. I'm not dissing it, but some people need more additional support from that. We're absolutely in that space. And part of my role is to get there and to raise awareness about that. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I'm something that I'm certainly looking forward to in the short term and the longer term, is to say to people, hello, we're here, we can help you, we can support you, come and speak to us, this is who we are, this is what we do. Talking about a national gambling helpline, talking about our team, for the community outreach team, exactly what it is that we do. I'm particularly focused at the moment on working in that underrepresented space as well, because people in that space definitely don't feel comfortable about coming and talking to gambling. So it's about raising that awareness, saying culturally they're a bit shy and a bit more embarrassed about it. And it's just about saying, everybody's the same. Anybody can be impacted. It doesn't matter who it is. And I think the other thing as well is what gender they are, what culture they are, what ethnicity they are, what age they are as well, because the team are currently supporting people who are 18. I think the oldest person that they've just put through is somebody in their 70s. So I think that's quite interesting. You're talking about women in particular, that again, it could be somebody whose husband or partner or dad has gambled for a long, long time, and now they're just realising that actually that's not okay. I do need help and support with that. And then the flip side as well, particularly during COVID, a lot more people were going online and looking at gambling. It's because they couldn't get out the house. Maybe women went to the bingo once a week, and now it's I can play it on my phone instead. Oh, great. Yeah. And then that's when it started to become a problem for them. I'm not saying that because you get women gamble right across the board for everything. I think that's something that I'm definitely passionate and keen to work towards.
I think gambling and stigma, that's kind of the thing that keeps coming round for us in terms of what might be critical for reducing gambling harms in that sort of future space. The more that we could work to a place where we can normalise more open conversations in the way that somebody might talk about other issues, maybe around their health. Like you might get a group of women saying, oh my God, I absolutely have to go and have a month dry, or I really need to sort of consider how much I might have drank at the weekend and I can't, carry on with that. Or people might have conversations around that's it, I'm done smoking. I've spoken to friends or family and I've thought about myself and I'm spending too much and I can really sort of start to feel the effects on my health. So the areas where we could be quite open about things that we know that are not great and not healthy for us, if we could pull gambling into that space, that it becomes more of an accepted day-to-day type of thing that can almost not point it out in each other, but kind of accept that, okay, so that's happened and are you going to sort of do something about it? Because you could sort of see that it's having those negative consequences. It still feels so hidden. And I suppose hidden in that, where is the stigma with it? Is it that if you can't just sit there and think that you could have that chat with your friends if you're out for lunch or you've met up for a cup of tea or something, and gambling can't be talked about when we've not cracked it yet, right? And until we kind of get into that space where it feels like it's a okay conversation to be had, or that you could say to somebody, actually, not for me, I don't gamble. To be really owning it as the same way as you'll get someone to say, oh, I used to smoke, but I don't smoke anymore. Be really okay and be quite proud of the fact that you're now a non-smoker. Well, actually, I'm a non-gambler. If we could sort of move people further along that line, it'd be great. Thinking about what might need to change, and then for people of Scotland, the bit that we had a parliamentary event, didn't we, a few months ago, and we got to speak to some MSPs in Holyrood, and we were listening to sort of their areas of focus, and they were definitely picking up on the impacts, and that felt really positive for Scotland, that you had people in those sort of positions of influence who had really seemed to listen and catch hold about the impacts around gambling harm, and seemed quite committed to say, listen, if we can make differences, if we can make changes, at our level, and that would sort of cascade down into communities to keep people safer. One of the things that seemed to be centred on with sort of advertising and stuff in sports, but it seems to be the one that people catch hold of quite a lot. And the bit that stands out for me around that is like, I don't know if that would reduce gambling harms for women if we removed sponsorship on football shirts. I don't know that the impact for women is clear to me as to what impact that would have. And we've seen a rise, you know, if you look at different stats and different peoples and organisations, you know, sort of data would tell you that we've seen an increase in women coming forward around gambling harms. I don't know that those sort of progressive measures are going to necessarily be the thing then that affects gambling harms for women. So it feels like we're still a little bit behind in recognising what is it that's causing women to be experiencing more higher levels of gambling harm. And that's a bit of work that still needs to be done, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just pick up on one of the things that you'd said around making the conversation around people in recovery, being able to talk about it without shame and stigma, even at good points in their life. We see the gambling industry has made our culture in the UK, gambling is so normal, that baseline normalcy that goes on, and yet talking about being in recovery isn't baseline normal when it really could and should be. And I think that that's something I feel really, really strongly about, because it's like if somebody asks me if I have a gambling, you know, I'll tell them. I mean, how does anybody know? But if the conversation comes up, and then it's kind of like busting myths, and it makes it easier for people to ask questions. And people, this is maybe something that is like for like listeners, but if you just ask the question if somebody says I'm in recovery from gambling, chances are it will help them to understand their own recovery, but also help for other people around them, even strangers, to learn a little bit about it. And I think that doing that little bit, like by little, it's a tiny little thing, but even doing that little bit more, that ripple effect can help people in general who aren't affected by gambling, but the greater population to kind of get an idea about the problem and about the issues and about recovery and about how things get better. And then it kind of takes a little bit of power away from the industry, and that's really what we're trying to do, really feel passionate about. So yeah, it's really making that sort of normalcy around the conversation about it. Almost an equal part is the way that gambling is seen, because it's absolutely obscene the way that the industry and advertising and the football and can you walk down your street and you can't go on your phone and there's like something spinning and there's something getting advertised. That's all became such normal behaviour. So we have to take some of that back.
Yeah, you know, we hear that in the language of members of the public, and it's not necessarily someone that we're talking to directly about any, you know, their experience of gambling harms, but we do an awful lot of community-facing events, all our teams everywhere, and you know, in and around Glasgow and Edinburgh and South and North Lanarkshire. She's there's nowhere she's not tapped in.
She gets around.
You not go, Lorraine, but we see it across our other regions as well. So yeah, I mean, I was at an event at the weekend in Northampton, and we're seen and we're out there, and everyone's doing that. We are all doing our bit together. But, you know, one of the comments that someone made when they come past, go, sick of it, sick of all the advertising. And I was like, right, you know, okay, you're right.
That's becoming a common thing. That's
members of the public who, I mean, she said, nothing to do with me, but oh my God. And she said, and why, and this was her comment, and why is so much targeted at women? I was like, and I was thinking, this is interesting because I'm going to Kat's podcast, right? I said, all right. I said, what do you think? You know, is that what you see? She said, it is clear. She said, it is so targeted. And she said, I don't, she says, there's this one, there's this program on, and that one's sponsored, and the adverts in between, and it's the Times, isn't it? In the time. And I said, okay. So, you know, sort of had a sort of an open sort of chat about that. And I think what I'm hearing a lot, and I'm sure Lorraine is the same, is this is quite a general conversation that we're hearing in our communities. So there is definitely, I think, a public appetite for, you know, reduction around that. It's certainly
good to hear.
What we get, you know, they're saying that something has to change. They're not happy with it.
When that sort of starts to become common consensus, then you feel like things are starting to change, or the tide's starting to turn a little bit, where it's like, especially that thing of being just hit over the head constantly. When you're not a gambler and you're noticing the amount of the level adverts, when they're on, why they're on. It's
and
like,
then to hear it in Holyrood as well, right? So you're hearing it at that top level, and like I say, the conversations we were all having that day and the feedback we got
that was good day.
Was the same, right? You know, it's the same. So that's a random person walking past me at an event in Northampton, and MSPs in Holyrood. It's the same. It's the same message. Like something has to sort of change there, I think. So I don't think anyone sort of has got a different opinion across the board. I don't think.
Thank you so much, Nicola, Lorraine. It's been brilliant to hear each of your insights and pockets of advice and to learn more about the work that you do at GamCare. Thank you so much for being my guest and being part of the No Dice podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. On the next episode, we'll be talking about steps that can be taken further into gambling recovery for women, an episode titled Towards Sincere Recovery, where we'll be discussing trips, slips and falls and bouncing back from relapses. Thank you so much for listening, and catch you next time on No Dice, a 12-episode series discussing female gambling addiction and women's recoveries journeys across Scotland.